Now, my official statement about the game on Saturday is that it said way more about Kansas than it did K-State. And I think there are positive things to take from the game if you're a K-State fan. It's great to see special teams continue to be a beast. It's great to see the offense put up over 200 yards on 3 straight drives for 3 touchdowns at the beginning of the second half. All that's awesome. But basically all K-State did was show up, and it was like Kansas was, a butler with one of those literal silver platters that has like the silver dome on top of it that you just pull off and then hand it to somebody, and it's just literally been served to you on a silver platter. That's what Kansas was. Like, it may as well have been Les Miles. It may as well have been Les Miles in a tuxedo. No mask, of course, because, COVID, opting out, opting into the pandemic, that whole thing. And just a silver platter, and he hands you the governor's cup on said silver platter. That's what happened. I mean, the decision to punt the ball to Phillip Brooks with 8 seconds left in the first half, having already given up a touchdown to him, is the worst college football coaching decision I've seen in like 10 years. I mean, it's just so easy. That's so easy. That's such an easy one. And that was emblematic of Kansas's entire game. They muffed a punt. They gave up 2 punt return touchdowns. They gave up more punt return yards to one of your players than anybody in college football had for the entire season. Even now, even as we still sit here now, they threw one of the most tailor-made room service pick sixes that I've ever seen in college football to Justin Gardner. Like, that was as horrendous and wretched a coaching performance as I can remember seeing in a K-State Kansas game. And you know that I'm scraping the bottom of the barrel when I'm talking about K-State Kansas games in terms of coaching performances, because there have been some bad ones. I mean, K-State beat Kansas 64-0 where they were up 64-rock in the third quarter. Kansas played a lot of games against Terry Allen. Kansas played Charlie Weiss, or K-State played Charlie Weiss. All right, K-State played David Beatty, who in retrospect did a hell of a lot better job competing with K-State than what we've seen out of Les Miles in 2 years. That game spoke volumes about where Kansas's program is at, much more so than it did about where K-State's program is at. And K-State is in a great spot, and it does accentuate the difference between the two hires and where these two programs are headed. But guys, let's be honest, like, that was just such a wretched, awful performance across the board in so many ways that are quantifiable by coaching, not even so much lack of talent, that to me, that is the most damning and biggest takeaway from the game. Like, Les Miles does not know what he is doing. That coaching staff does not know what they are doing. I'm going to poke fun at the special teams coordinator later in the 30 for 30, but he spent a year at Air Force last year coaching like tight ends. But I mean, before that, he was a position coach. In 2018, their special teams coordinator was a position coach at Bethel University in Tennessee, but an NAIA school in Tennessee. And now he's your special teams coordinator, and that's what you guys are doing on special teams. Missed field goal, muff punt, 2 return touchdowns, over 180 yards in return yardage to one player in a game. I mean, Kansas can tell me all they want about how Les is rebuilding the roster and they're getting their numbers up and they're kidding the high schools. It doesn't matter who you put out on the field if that is what you're doing to coach those guys up, and that is what you're doing as a coach to put them in the best position to win the game. I'm sorry, it doesn't matter if you have better numbers and a little bit more depth and more high school players. You're not winning anything, and you're certainly not coming at King Klieman. Like, you're not coming at Chris Klieman with that bleep. That's not happening. And that is what I take away from that game, that Kansas is moving further from competency while K-State is moving closer to Big 12 contender. And the rapid descent that the Kansas program is on right now seems to be steeper to me than the ascent of K-State's program. Not that that's really a bad thing for K-State. You just sit and watch Kansas flounder around right now, and that's all you have to do. I mean, it was a clown show. I mean, it was a clown show. You might as well, the Kansas coaching staff may as well have just showed up, Mitch, in one of those little tiny cars where everybody is like packed in and 17 clowns come out of the one little tiny car. That could have been the whole crew, man. Would have been Les, it would have been Dearman, it would have been Elliott. All of those guys should have just come out to midfield like the Willie skit. Should have just been, instead of tackling somebody, the Kansas coaches roll in the little clown car, and everybody gets out with their big feet and their big nose and the paint all over their face, and that would have been appropriate.
Well, they could have just borrowed Willie's car because he was too busy doing push-ups anyway to be driving any car around Bill Snyder Family Stadium parking lot. I totally agree with you, and I've been trying to search my brain to give a logical explanation for KU's decision to keep kicking to Phillip Brooks. He brought 2 kicks back, but keep in mind, he probably should have brought back 2 more. If the blocking may have just been a little bit better, he's probably bringing 4 kicks back to the house in that game. But the only idea I could come to mind is maybe they were just, KU was just buried so far in field position that they needed just to try to create some space, give their defense a chance to stop K-State or force the Cats to put together a long drive. K-State's defense was so good in this game that, forcing KU to punt, beating KU on fourth downs, turning them over on an interception. It was such a mess for KU in that entire ball game that they just couldn't get anything together besides a drive or two, and even one of those drives ended on a field goal miss that they should have made. They started a 17-year-old quarterback. They might as well pulled a 10th grader from the punt, pass, and kick competition to send those punts down the field, because at least that person could have maybe directed one out of bounds so they didn't get a big return.
Yeah, I mean, I hear Les Miles say after the game, well, we were on our second and third string punter, and, we were down this guy and this guy. Okay, all the more reason to tell the guy to just whack it out of bounds. Like, if I'm rolling the backup punter out there, that I'm saying, hey, man, just kick it out of bounds. Get as much yardage as you can, and then kick it out of bounds, especially at the end of the half. I mean, there's just no excuse for that happening at all. There's none. And I'm also sorry, but if Les is going to be the guy that's telling me, well, I swear I told the kid not to kick it to him and it just happened, I don't trust Les Miles. Like, what reason do I have to trust Les Miles? I can't trust him to handle himself during COVID, okay? I can't trust him to handle himself during his coach's show. I can't trust him to keep the salty iguana safe, from not spreading the disease around to all those people. I can't trust him on that. I can't trust him to hold a train of thought in a press conference. So am I going to trust him when he says, well, it was the kid's fault, it was the punter's fault? Aside from the fact that it's throwing your players under the bus, which is something that Chris Klieman would never do, I'm just not going to trust that. It's all about coaching. And that thing is a mess. It is a disaster. I mean, Kansas looked better, more organized, sharper, and crisper when Les was not on the sideline at West Virginia. Vegas had it right. Vegas had it right by making Kansas less of a dog when they found out that Les Miles would not be coaching in that game. And that's the situation that Kansas is in. By the way, still on the hook for around $10 million for the rest of Les Miles' contract at Kansas. They do not have a buyout, but they just have to pay him if they were to fire him without cause. They have to pay him the remainder of the contract. And there's about $10 million left on that contract. In a COVID environment, all right? COVID, cash-strapped athletic departments. Kansas owes Les Miles $10 million for another 3.5 years on his contract. Have fun with that.
John, have you ever been so overreacting to a K-State loss that you thought, God, I am so embarrassed by this team, that you even said publicly, maybe on Facebook as a teenager, said, I am so embarrassed by this loss. You took your shirt off, you threw it in the hamper, you weren't going to wear K-State colors for a while. You ever been in that situation? Because I know a lot of people have. It's a common reaction to when your team loses. You overreact and use words like embarrassed. Well, KU fans, it is totally fair for you to be embarrassed by that kind of coaching performance, to take your shirt off and throw it to the hamper. You've had a lot of bad days as a KU football fan, but this is justified to act that way.
100%. 100%. You want to be the Skip Bayless and throw it in the trash like he does with his Cowboy stuff all the time? You do that. You should do that. There is a part of me that almost feels bad for people who legitimately care about Kansas football. Not Kansas fans, people who legitimately care about Kansas football, because I don't think your average Kansas fan does, but those that do, boy, 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 boy.